The Assyrian people come from one of the world's largest ancient civilization, dating back thousands of years. And yet, the exact details of their history and their current status are often unclear. So, who are the Assyrians? Well, the Assyrians were an ancient civilization based in Mesopotamia. Although their homeland was spread throughout regions comprising modern-day Syria, Turkey, Iran, and northern Iraq. They are not to be confused with Syrian people. Syrians are nationals of the country Syria, whereas Assyrians are descendants of their own respective ancient and powerful civilization. Modern-day Assyrians' ancestors formed the Assyrian Empire, which was a highly developed civilization boasting advanced technologies and powerful militaries. There are estimated to be over 5 million Assyrians around the globe today, many of them living far away from their traditional homeland. Diaspora Assyrians are mainly based in the United States, Australia, Sweden, and Germany. Of those Assyrians still living in their traditional lands, most of them tend to be based in either Syria or Iraq. Very few remain in Iran and Turkey. Ever since the Assyrian Empire fell in the 6th century BC, its people have been largely persecuted and constantly driven from their native land. They are effectively without a place to call home, a stateless nation. In order to understand how and why the Assyrians have been oppressed for over 2,000 years, we gotta go all the way back to better understand their cultural makeup and history. Assyria was a nation-state, located in northern Mesopotamia. In the 2nd millennium BC, it was considerably developed. However, Assyria really took hold of the region during the early and middle parts of the 1st millennium BC. This was largely due to Assyrians' incredibly advanced innovations, particularly in developing their military. Assyria was the first civilization in the region to produce weapons made from iron. This gave them a massive advantage over their enemies, who were still using bronze-made weapons and tools. The Assyrians' deft iron-making skills meant that their weapons and their armor were far superior to others, giving them a decisive edge on the battlefield. The Assyrians also started using engineers to provide support to the military by building ladders and ramps to digging tunnels. This allowed their soldiers to storm enemy fortresses and cities and overpower them with their superior weaponry. They also developed the use of chariots in battle, which proved to be almost impossible to combat, not unlike the tanks that were introduced in the early 20th century. These sophisticated breakthroughs allowed Assyrians to not just defend their home state, but to expand it. At its height in the 7th century BC, the Assyrian Empire was the largest in the world. It covered a vast area, stretching from the Nile in Egypt to the Caucasus Mountains and across the west to the Mediterranean. However, as has been the case with all mighty empires throughout history, the Assyrians were eventually challenged and overpowered. Separate forces from Babylonia and what is now Iran began serious offensives against Assyria, and by 600 BC, the once mighty empire fell. Over the next several centuries, the Assyrians lived under the rule of the Persian and Babylonian empires. Assyrian soldiers were renowned for their fighting prowess, and they were regularly called upon to go into battle with Persian forces. From the 1st century BC, Assyria fell under the rule of Greeks and Romans, although the nation-state was allowed a reasonable measure of autonomy. The major turning point for the Assyrian people came between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, when they were Christianized by the Romans. The Assyrians adopted Christianity as their main religion and began to spread it to the Far East. However, the Assyrians' Christianity was to become a point of contention around the 7th century of the Common Era, after the Muslim conquering of Persia. An influx of Arab, Turkic, and Iranian groups gradually started settling in the Assyrian traditional homeland of Upper Mesopotamia. The Assyrian people soon became the minority in their nation-state. They remained relatively autonomous, however, were denied many rights such as access to jobs with status, political freedom, and religious expression. The lack of tolerance stemming from ethnic and religious differences resulted in regular massacres being carried out against Assyrians, with tensions increasing in the 18th and 19th centuries. This culminated in the Assyrian Genocide of 1915. When Ottoman Turkey sided with Germany in World War I, Britain asked the Assyrians to form an alliance, largely based on their shared Christianity. This tragically led to the slaughter of thousands of Assyrians by Ottoman and Kurdish forces. It's estimated somewhere between 200 and 300,000 people were killed. Droves of Assyrians living in Turkey fled to north to Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Jordan, only to be persecuted again. Assyrians had been imploring Britain to be allocated their own official territory, but in 1921, that hope began to fade fast. The British Mandate of Iraq finished, and control of the region was handed over to the Iraqi government, which had no plans of granting the Assyrians any autonomy or recognition. This led to an ongoing exodus of Assyrian people from their homeland. First, they headed into nearby Russia, Georgia, or Armenia, then eventually further west and overseas to the US and Australia in particular. In 1933, Iraqi soldiers killed large numbers of Assyrians in the Simele massacre. The official death toll has been estimated at anywhere between 600 and 7,000. Attacks on Assyrians continued throughout the 20th century, and the persecution still exists. When Iraq was thrown into civil war in the early 2000s, the consequences for Assyrians were dire. Being a Christian minority in a region where the battle for outright power was being bitterly fought was fraught with danger. They suffered from bombings, killings, kidnappings, torture, harassment, dispossession. It was open season, which made it even worse with the rise of ISIS in the region. In 2014, Assyrian homes, businesses, and churches were bombed, and any prominent business leaders or members of the clergy were either killed or abducted. The religious and ethnic tensions, plus the unlikely chances of gaining independence, have made the situation untenable for many Assyrians. It's estimated that around 1/3 of the world's Assyrian population lives overseas, far away from their native land. They are thriving Assyrian communities here in major global cities such as Detroit, Sydney, and Stockholm. Within these cities and communities, Assyrian people still proudly enjoy everything that goes with their culture and traditions. Many retain their traditional language, which is Neo-Aramaic language, dating back to ancient civilizations in the Middle East. Assyrians have their own restaurants, they got their own social clubs, language schools, and perhaps most importantly, churches. Being able to live in societies that allow the freedom of religious expression makes for a much better life than living in constant persecution in their homeland. Weddings are typically carried out according to Assyrian traditions, with distinct links to Christianity. As with other Christian societies, brides dress in white and the grooms are decked out in black suits. Weddings are also a great opportunity for Assyrian people to rejoice in their traditional music and dance. Traditional music is an upbeat type of folk, with the modern pop blend now being incorporated. Assyrians celebrate traditional Christian holidays, such as Easter and Christmas, as well as their own unique festivals and occasions. Perhaps one of the most important days in the Assyrian calendar is on April the 1st, which is the Assyrian New Year. This day is particularly important for Assyrians because it symbolizes the crucial link between their ancient past and modern-day existence. The holiday is also called Akitu, which originates in the traditional Assyrian region of Mesopotamia. It was to mark the beginning of spring, which was and still is a joyous time. Trees and flowers start to bloom and symbolize positive themes like rebirth and renewal. Such concepts are understandably important to a culture that has experienced more than its fair share of suffering and victimization. Acknowledging the past is a key factor in Assyrian culture. The early Assyrian civilization was acclaimed for its innovative and forward-thinking contributions to the world. While it is hard to pinpoint exactly where they originated from, crucial inventions such as the use of the wheel and written languages can be linked to the Assyrians. If they didn't actually pioneer such innovations, then they certainly realized their importance and were quick to adopt them. They were renowned for their expertise in metallurgy, and they were able to produce highly advanced tools and weapons from bronze and iron. The Assyrians were exceptional engineers, which was demonstrated in their public works. The use of hydraulic engineering for irrigation and construction allowed them to build long-lasting structures and smooth-functioning cities. They were also real good at record-keeping and developing sophisticated systems of administration, all of which were key to establishing and developing modern societies. The true wonders of civilization of the ancient Assyrians should not be forgotten. Despite centuries of hardship and persecution, Assyrian people remain very aware of their history and remain fiercely proud. And they have a lot to be proud of.